just want to give a quick introduction for Mark. He's been in mapping and GIS for over 40 years. He started when he was 10 years old, actually. No, he has a passion for how Bible place names can expand our understanding in Scripture for over 25 years. He's been a Christian most of his life and recommitted his life to Christ in 1984. He enjoys spending time with his wife, 6 kids, 8 grandkids, and traveling the world. I know he's done backpacking too, so he is, and he's a good guy besides all that. But anyway, go ahead, Mark.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Juliana. What we're looking at today is what I call Theo-Geo, which is really expanding biblical understanding with place names and geography. And there we go. I was having trouble advancing there. So just looking at biblical place names, I think some of you will be familiar with these things. It's handy to have a Bible atlas when you're going through you're reading through the Bible. Probably you're well aware of biblical place names and geography that are important for your understanding of biblical text. One example I'm pulling up here is the boundaries of the 12 tribes of Israel described in the book of Joshua. And it's difficult to understand sometimes the spatial reference, without a map. If you go through the text in Joshua, oftentimes it has place names. Some of them are, you can find today. Some of them, have been lost in time. Some of them are unknown locations. And sometimes it goes along water features, like rivers. And sometimes it's fairly detailed. In some areas, it's less detailed as you look along the map. And it's useful to have, that sort of reference. As we go through the New Testament, looking at the place names, for instance, where Jesus' ministry was around the Sea of Galilee, it gives you a spatial context. You can visualize the spatial relationships of the place names where Jesus was, and it gives us a geographic reference frame. For instance, when Jesus walked from town to town or crossed the Sea of Galilee on a boat. And get a sense of those places. I know I looked one time. I was looking at the scripture references when the apostles were arguing who was the greatest among them, and looking at where they started and where they were going, and it realized the apostles had been arguing all day about who was the greatest. And then Jesus sits them down and talks with them about being a servant. And so I think sometimes those getting a sense of really where those places are in reference to each other can add context and value to what you're reading. And of course, the Apostle Paul's journeys, seeing the extent of the Apostle Paul's travels on the 4 different journeys he's taken, gives us an understanding for how the gospel spread so quickly in the first century. So those are, I think, examples that are familiar. That led me to start to look at this a little more, and I wanted to share some inspirational sources that some of you may or may not be aware of. One of them is Todd Bolin, who's a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, but also at the Masters University in Jerusalem. And so he is on site and has compiled a set of something like 20,000 photos of biblical locations. And he organizes those by books of the Bible, as well as by what he calls sites, or the geographic locations. And he frequently combines photos with descriptions of the locations, and he has those in his blogs and in his newsletters. And so I recommend you look at that. By the way, I've put sources in the bottom of each of these slides, so you can go back and look at these resources. Another one that really inspired me is Ray Vanderlyn, and Ray started the That the World May Know ministry, and he's recorded videos as he goes on site to biblical geographic locations to help the viewer understand the Bible in light of the historical and the cultural context in which it's written. And I found time and again that Ray Vanderlyn has amazing insights in pulling together not only the culture, but the geography of these areas, and helps pull out meaning and additional understanding we may not get ourselves just in reading scripture. So those are also available to you. And similarly, but in a little different vein, more set up for kind of an is Dave Stott's Drive Through History. And maybe some of you have seen this on TV. It's a whole series that he does, and he focuses on history, but he frequently quotes Bible verses while on location, particularly in his series on the Gospels, on Acts to Revelations, on his work on the Holy Land and others. So those are you can sometimes find those on TV, and he also has them available on his website. So those are all things that were very I thought was very interesting, and expanded my understanding of scripture and these geographic locations. That led me to looking for other resources and publications. And I just want to share, I spent some time kind of honing this down to be specific here, because I've looked at a number of sources, but I think there's kind of a lineage here that's important, that started with what's called the Barrington Atlas of the Greek and Roman World. And it was compiled by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill under the direction of the distinguished ancient historian Richard Talbert. And it was published in, it was finished in 2000, published at a copyright of 2001. And Richard Talbert was acted as the editor with a number of academics who researched over a 12-year period the geographic locations of the Roman and Greek world. So it's not just biblical place names, but you can use that as a resource, as a reference. Now they're in the Roman names, so you can there are aliases where you can plug in a name and it'll pull up the Roman names or the Greek names. There's over 20,000 places from the ancient Greek and Roman world, making it a comprehensive reference for locations that you can use. And I'll show you how you might be able to access that, because right now it may not be accessible to most people. There's only so many of these Bibles that were, or atlases that were produced. And, you can find them in libraries and whatnot. But they then put this out as a iPad app, as an iOS app. And all the content from the Barrington Atlas of the Greek and Roman world can be accessed through this app. And you can zoom into, up to 800% to see the detail on the maps. You can plug in a place name or a location to access the 20,000 locations that are in the interactive gazetteer. So that is available on an app site. What I think is interesting and most accessible to all of you is the Pleiades gazetteer. And the Barrington Atlas, and the reason I wanted to show that is because that's the origins of this. And the Barrington Atlas of the Greek and Roman world led to this Pleiades project. So Pleiades is a joint project of the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World at New York University, and as well as the Ancient World Mapping Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is the one that created the Barrington Atlas. So you've got the same people involved in these things. And they wanted to have a way that people could access this gazetteer. So, and it's continuing to be built. The Pleiades is a community-built gazetteer and a graph of ancient places. So you can type in place names and find locations. In 2012, the Ancient World Mapping Center, again at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, launched the first version of an online GIS application called Antiquity a la carte. And that covered the entire Greco-Roman world. This application is based on the Barrington Atlas, as well as geodata from Pleiades and other sources. Unfortunately, the Antiquity a la carte app went offline in December last year, and the Ancient World Mapping staff have begun developing a replacement program to be named AWMC Interactive. And once this is complete, this platform will allow users to view and navigate the same GIS data previously available in the a la carte, the Antiquity a la carte. The good news is that the Ancient World Mapping Center are using ArcGIS Online to create what they're calling the AWMC Interactive, allowing users to view this geospatial data from their holdings and the Pleiades Gazetteer and some other partners, and it allows you to access this through the web, so you don't have to have it. You just access it as on a web browser and having a web GIS. And the current version of the software is a prototype. It literally was released this month as a beta, and they're looking for feedback to improve on the program. So it'll be interesting to watch going forward where that goes. And with that, I just wanted to kind of say, well, what's next? That was a synthesis of what resources are out there to help assist you as you're reading through the Bible and understanding the geography. What I propose oftentimes in research is what is future research. And what I'd suggest is I think there are kind of three use cases for future research and work. First would be going from the Bible or other historical documents and hyperlinking that to a location on a GIS web map with contextual information about that place. And then the reverse, going from the web map and having it linked to biblical references or historical references. And thirdly, place names change over time. And so having a time element to this on the map where you could look at the different place names over time and see the temporal changes would be interesting. So with that, I've gone through this, I think, faster than I anticipated, but I did want to leave time for questions and discussion. So with that, I'll open it up and see if people have questions.
Well, Mark, this is Jerry. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
So maybe one thing to add to that list, you had three great ideas. What next? It would be nice to have curated lists of social and historical and theological papers or information on those sites. So going to sort of a qualitative kind of exploration of that.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Jerry.
Chris has his hand up.
Yeah,
Chris.
I didn't know if that was protocol, but I figured I'd try it out. So I don't know if you ever experienced the Bible 360 app from Glow Bible. It was around and it's no longer available as of like 2017. Mark Burnett and Roma Downey were a part of it, and I can probably pop in a link from a very old link that I found. But essentially, what it did was this: it took the Bible, and you could search through the lens of the text, and all the scripture was basically metadata tagged with locations, and then you could enter the Bible through the atlas. And then you would be able to click on a location and cross-reference to the scripture. They also had media, so artwork, 3D images, all kinds of amazing things. And it had a timeline scale as well. So it was really immersive. I loved it so much. I've tried to find and reach out to the leader of it. And he's now working at a Bible society in Florida. He's a Brazilian gentleman. And he is looking at actually taking it one step further. It's no longer available as an app, but he's going one step further and looking at virtual reality or augmented reality. So essentially using gamification and tools like, what's that? There's a gaming software that allows you to build these immersive experiences and basically letting you take tours throughout places in scripture and immerse yourself into it that way. And it's really amazing. But the Bible 360 app, if you've ever experienced it, was pretty awesome. And it does some of those things. I've tried to recreate that or build on that idea in a few different capacities. I found an old link I can share about it. But anyway, that was something I found interesting that immediately made me think of your work, Mark.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that app, so that's good. I'll have to go take a look at that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you can read up a little bit about the history and some of the screenshots, but in terms of an actual app, it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things we found is I've looked at and watched Pleiades, and there was a couple. I decided not to go into the detail on that, so probably one of my presentation was a little shorter. But there was something called the Digital Atlas of Rome, and there was also the Digital Atlas of Rome and the medieval civilizations that were predecessors to that. And the challenge is keeping up with the technology. And Pleiades is, run into this now, with the Pleiades project with the Antiquities a la carte that I mentioned, where that app lived for about 12 years and then finally it literally died. So they're having to rebuild that on the technology. So I think that is part of the challenge, is keeping up with technology.
Let's see. Any other? Benu, good to see you're back. I hope. Sorry that you had to miss the slides. Anybody else have questions or comments or?
Yeah, I'll float one. What I haven't done an Esri story map, but what would it be like to turn, say, the Gospel of Matthew into a story map? And then what level of effort would that be? Prohibitive or doable?
I think, I think you could take some of the highlights and do that. I think that there's so many place names in the Bible, and I don't remember, how many. I don't know how many are in Matthew particularly, but it would end up being quite a long story map. But that could be interesting, to put together.
Yeah, because I'd be thinking the other half of the question is, I'm just thinking, like, what other layers would we add to to the story map? I think the standard ones we GISers would think of would be environmental, like groundwater might be particularly pertinent in the Holy Land, or vegetation. I don't know if Romans, they obviously took censuses. Does the Antiquities or anybody have any of that data that they could throw in for population, locations, or density? I imagine there's probably other layers that some of us might like to see in a map like that. Just throwing it open to the group.
Yeah, I myself have not seen the demographic data like that. I'm not an ancient historical, academic, so I certainly haven't done a thorough look through the literature. I have not come across that.
I'm not sure if someone had mentioned this earlier, but there is a data set called the openbible.info, which has a whole lot of Bible, shape files and stuff with book by book. I'm just curious if anyone's familiar with that, or is it, it's Creative Commons, so it's listed as Creative Commons, so looks like people could use it. It's just very interesting data set. I think it's the Google KML files. And I was thinking of using it in a project, so just curious because it has so much of Bible names and places that are tagged.
I'm looking real quickly now. I think it's been a while since I took a look at this file, Benu.
Okay.
There was another one that was similar. Now this is different than the one I saw. The other one I saw was kind of crowdsourced, and people were laying locations over it, which was interesting because you get a sense of where these places were. But it had duplicates on there, and they had different locations, so it was pretty crowded. And that was on top of a Google Maps. This one looks, this looks much cleaner. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Go ahead,
I'm going to download and try it out because what we're looking for is so we built a scripture engagement site for local languages, vernacular languages, like a Bible study website. So we were looking for a geotagged English data set so that we could, map the corresponding vernacular equivalents. So if you say, Canaan in the English and the equivalent word in a different language, I was looking for an open data set. I just stumbled on this recently. That's why I'm asking if anyone's familiar with this or if it's, reliable in some way or the other. But yeah. Because you can fairly easily convert the labels into a vernacular script, especially in languages which are phonetic, like where I am right now. So languages are very phonetic. So if you have a name and it's geotagged, not very hard to convert it, into an equivalent label and get a map in that language. Yeah.
Yeah, Joseph, I see your hands up.
Oh, many thanks. Hi, folks. Joseph Kursky here. Hey, I serve on the ESRI education team. I used to work at USGS. I know John Guthrie here. Anyway, good to see you, John. Anyway, I'm gonna put this in the chat box about the story map. They're very accessible. I would say, there's a lot of long story maps out there. So, if you're thinking about doing this, I would say pick one chapter and do that, and just focus on that, because part of it's easy to actually create a story map, but you'll see a lot of very long ones out there, the age of the Anthropocene and others that are very long. And you think, oh, I can do that in an hour. Well, some of those are very long and they actually required quite a few weeks of, compiling and so on. So I'd say start small and see how that works. In terms of the person that just shared that site, I've seen it before also. And one of the things I'm really passionate about on the education team here is encouraging. We work with K-12 and university, technical, tribal, and community colleges, and I'm always encouraging students exactly what you're talking about, my friend, and that is be critical of the data. Don't just accept it because it's on the web, and don't just accept it because it's a map, but actually look into it. So yeah, I've not looked into I've not verified those locations on there, but it's good that you're asking questions about that, which is of course what we want students and others to do. Anyway, I hope this link in the chat box is helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, I think good advice there.
And Stephen in chat has mentioned about the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., that they've mapped out public references to scripture. And they have a 3D augmented reality for many biblical sites. Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C.
That's great. Yeah, that's it. That's really interesting. It's amazing how many there are.
Yeah.
Inscribed in the buildings, etched into the buildings.
Mark, how did you get interested in this? Just as a kid type thing, or I mean, or later when you started after Esri, or how?
I think just as being a geographer, I got interested in the place names, and then I was exposed early on to Ray Vanderland's probably mid '90s Ray Vanderland series on that the world may know, and was just intrigued by the insights that he found in Scripture. I hesitated going into all the details. I thought about going down that route here, but it's that having visuals that represent that. It's, I'm trying to be careful of the copyright and size sources. But I think one that really intrigued me is if you go to Caesarea Philippi, and it was a place of pagan worship where they had the god Pan was actually up in a carved area up on a cliff, and there literally is a cave where a river comes out, an underground river comes through, and when Jesus talks about, Peter, on this rock I will build my church. Right before that, he talks about, or right after that, he talks about the gates of hell will not prevail. And literally, that in that time frame, they thought that cave was the entrance to the gates of Hades. So there's that kind of an insight you get from the geography, location, and the context of the culture of the time.
Mark, yeah, I remember watching a few episodes of that series, That the World May Know, and I remember there was one where he actually referenced, elevation and other, geographic concepts, and that that got me thinking about, what can, we, the GIS community, add to, to even expand on what he was doing in terms of, insights and things like that. I never really pursued it, but the question's always stuck in my mind, and so it looks like you're doing a lot of that too, so it's good.
Yeah, thank you. I see Steven's put an invitation into the chat. If you're ever in DC, you could contact him about tickets for the Bible Museum. It's a fantastic museum. I've been a couple times now, and really well done. And actually, there's a whole display there on Dave Stoats and the drive-through history. And they actually use a lot of clips of his videos in different displays around the museum to try and highlight specific points.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, this is just neat to see so many resources out there, Mark, like you've shown, and just folks who've ever shared. That's more than I thought of. I've sometimes we go to the Bible and see the maps in the back, and that's all. But wow, there's a whole lot there.
Yeah, I'm personally really excited about this, as we just like some in my Bible study at church. There's been some spatial things that have come up, and I've been a little frustrated with my Bible maps, and also just thinking, I don't know, like lugging a Bible atlas to church is a little bit harder. But right, like we've been studying the life of Moses and like the 10 plagues, and how the Israelites were actually living in a slightly different location, and just understanding some of the differences in terms of why they weren't then impacted by plague. So I'm actually really excited to begin to use this, as well as just that reminder that these things exist and these resources exist that I can use in my personal devotion time.
That's good. Thanks, Juliana.
it just seems us being GIS people, we do have a love for maps, so it's nice to see them interactive, and just
Has anybody seen the?
I think you do have to be a Berean as you do the study. There are a number of things, and I think probably the path of Exodus from as the Israelites left Egypt and crossed the Red Sea, and then where they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. There's a number of theories out there. There's a number of resources that'll give you different paths. And so you do have to do a bit of study, and it's not necessarily definitive. So yeah, just a word of caution there. Sorry, someone was saying something?
I was just going to add, has anyone seen the work of Molly Burhans? She was on the Esri plenary at one point. She heads up an organization called Goodlands, and it's mapping the church. And so she's been to the Vatican archives and has geocoded many historic resources. It's primarily focused around the Catholic Church, but it's she has an open data portal with just tremendous resources around the lands of the church. And I don't know, it's been a while since I've heard her name, but this made me think of it. Tons of mapping elements from just historic stuff from 2,000 years of archival stuff. She's been given. She has some kind of UN status that gave her access to the archives, and was able to geocode and digitize a lot of that early church data.
Yeah, that's great. I've seen Molly speak a couple times. It's really interesting. Sorry, Lauren, was someone saying something?
Stephen, I was wondering if you have the URL, if you just pop the URL in the chat, that'd be great. Don't worry if you don't have it. But
I will look for something here.
I see Chris Jansen has put in a book on biblical sites of Turkey, and I was not aware of that.
So I have the actual book that I use when I travel, but I found another great link. I was thinking, more and more of the Bible is becoming real as archaeology is proving that these names and places that were mentioned in the Bible actually did exist or do exist under layers of dirt. And so to have those increasingly build evidence for the existence of biblical truth and see it on a map, and people could, stand on it and see the progress of the archaeology would be really interesting. I know in my travels, standing in the Garden Tomb or at Barnabas's tomb in Cyprus, or in different, the numerous places in Turkey where the Bible took place, actually more than Israel, really makes it come alive. And so I think that just adds to our evidence and our credibility as a faith. And so just like maps tell an amazing story, as you pointed out, but putting the archaeology, putting the names and places, it tells a different historical picture.
Yeah. So I saw some people had put in the chat that they've been to Israel. I one of the things I would suggest, I've been once, and I looked for a tour company that actually specialized in biblical locations. And I think that's important because you get very different perspectives. You in Israel, you have to have licensed tour guides, and they can be from any faith, which they should be, and they have to know about all faiths. So they actually go through study and testing for that. So you have to have that person that's licensed from Israel into on your tours. It's required. However, you also, if you go with a company, they can have someone who specifically has the biblical Christian perspective on these things, and I would say even evangelical Christian, if that's your background, if that's your interest, or whatever your kind of background is. Make sure that you're getting that aspect of it. Otherwise, it will be very much about what are the traditional sites and that may not be what your expectations are. Jerry?
Yeah, so I didn't even think about this earlier, but some of you might be interested in going on an archaeological dig. Some of them have gotten quite sophisticated and use survey-grade GPS units to record the location of their finds within a archaeological square. So I've done that 2 seasons and found it very interesting. So I haven't done it since 2013. Gotten too busy with other things, but if you know a university that does archaeology in the Middle East and you'd like to go, it's kind of like a paid vacation where you work really hard.
All right, all right. I see Chris is putting in more links.
Oh, that's the one I found. I found on my bookshelf.
Oh, good. I was going to ask if you could find that specific book because the first one went to the site.
Yeah.
So this is great.
Yeah,
I had not.
It's a good one. It's got all kinds of interesting info.
All right, I'll definitely have to look at that. I've not come across that one. And I've done, I've done research just as much in my time as I can. I've gone to the Library of Congress on multiple occasions and tried to find out what they have in their archives. There's the Geography and Map Library that you can go and get the Barrington Atlas out of. That's the first time I was able to actually. And then there's also other areas, but you have to get familiar with the Library of Congress catalog system, and you realize that a lot of their inventory is offsite. So you can go online and you can search for it ahead of time, and you can ask for them to have it sent to the reference desk if you want. So yeah, you can find some of these things at the Library of Congress if you're in DC. All right. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you, everybody, for your input. And I'll have to go and look at the links that everyone sent. So thank you. And with that, unless there's any other questions, we'll go ahead and stop the recording. And I'll thank all of you for joining. And as usual, you can find all of our webinars. Thank you. You can find all of our webinars on the christiansandgis.org. You can find blogs there, and you can. It's a place to be connected with this community. And if any of you have ideas for webinars that you would like to present to the group that you think would be interesting, please let us know. And we are planning to continue this webinar series as long as we can find content that's of interest to the community. Lauren, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. There's a resources tab on the website and does have some biblical resources too.